Good evening and welcome to this working session of the Lakeville Area Schools Board of Education. This meeting is being audio recorded, so for the purposes of that, we will have everyone go around and introduce their name and their role so that those listening know who's in attendance tonight. I'm Kim Baker and I'm the chair.
Doug Van Zyl, Superintendent of Schools.
David Anderson, School Board.
Brian Thompson, School Board.
Emily McDonald, Assistant Superintendent.
Judy Kelleher, Board of Education.
Dave Haveman, Executive Director of Student Services.
Bree Shinley, School Board.
Brenda Albrecht, Executive Director of Administrative Services.
Barry Lynn, School Board.
Carly Anderson, School Board.
All right, thank you very much for that introduction. Tonight we have three things on the agenda. After we finish the discussion on those items, then we will adjourn and go into a board development session for some staff development training. For the items that we have on the agenda tonight, the first one is the review of the superintendent evaluation, a board goals review, and then we're also going to talk about meeting norms. To keep the items in check, we're going to have a 20-minute time limit for each of these items. The board received these things over email, so you should have had time to review these in advance. So go ahead and start with the superintendent review.
Do you want me to go?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and Judy and you can jump in since you were part of this as well.
Yep.
So my understanding was that each board member had an opportunity to take a look at the information that MSBA put together and provide feedback to Judy or Kim in regard to what goal areas they wanted as maybe priorities. So from there, those goal areas were selected by the number of responses, and so they were kind of prioritized by what you as board members put together. And so I then took those goals after visiting with Judy and Kim, tied them to those particular areas. If you have that spreadsheet in front of you, goal one, it ties the standard one information for decision making, then gave you the spectrum of highly effective down to ineffective, gave you what the evaluation could look like, a comment area, and just some examples of what could be some performance indicators. The second goal was to tie standard two, budget development and maintenance, and again, what that is, provide leadership to maximize the use of district resources. Same format, those four areas from highly effective, effective, developing to ineffective are not applicable, but not applicable probably shouldn't be there because you said it's probably applicable. And then gave you the checkbox of what it could look like, common area, again, some examples. And then goal three tied to standard three, which is relationships develop upon and create additional internal and external connections and relationships, gave you those areas and then examples. And then we also, through conversation, said that we should provide some additional comment areas, which allows you to talk about maybe other strengths that aren't tied to those particular goal areas or areas of opportunity that could be addressed from there. The timeline for that, if I'm not right on this, Judy or Kim, correct me, we're talking about probably having a dipstick measure in October that's kind of a stoplight, red light, green light, yellow light, where you at in the process, and then another one in February, and then the final summative wraps up in July. So that's kind of the time frame. Took this from, again, the feedback that was presented to other from you as board members to Judy and Kim, and then they met with me. I think Judy and I met twice. I think Judy, Kim, and I met once, and kind of walked through this timeline and outline as far as what those evaluative areas would be. So,
And this draft was sent to the board last week in replacement of our meeting, because we had to change that meeting time. I did not receive any feedback that anything needed to be changed. Did you, Judy?
No, I did not.
Okay, all right. So does anybody have any questions or comments on this format? Does it look like what you expected? Obviously, it ties to our district strategic plan as well. That's highlighted on there. Any feedback, questions?
I like it. It's very simple, easy to understand.
and just so everybody knows, and people maybe that if they choose this isn't something that you just made up. It came from MSBA, the school board standards that were put together, and that you had an opportunity to look at. So it wasn't where you just said, hey, let's do X, let's do Y, let's do Z. You chose those standards based off of some models that were put together for the School Board Association.
Well, I think these standards also reflect the conversation of areas that we wanted to focus in on from a district level and a board level based off of our community survey.
Right.
And aligns to our strategic plan.
So looking at, when we have board meetings, can we get on the calendar on when those check-ins are going to occur, Kim, just so that we have them scheduled? So like for October, what's our meeting schedule look like?
I think we ended up deciding it was gonna be the first meeting in November or something like that. Did we decide that?
I'd have to go back and take
It
a
was
look at
November
that.
and February, so we had a
November and
couple of,
February.
cause they go live in September, and that would give up close to, 45 days or 60 days.
I think that's right. I
So
did
it
bring
was
my notes with
November
me.
and February is where we
Yeah.
ended up.
Okay. So that November meeting would be the end of the month? Or would it be during a working session?
It would be during a working session.
You-
Okay.
And normally
Go
what you
into
do is you do it
closed
during a
session.
closed session as part
Okay.
of your follow-up.
Yeah.
And then you share that information.
Yeah. we
So
ended
whatever
up-
meeting it's scheduled with, you'd
Low.
be backed up with a closed session to have that.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think we're good.
all right. Go ahead, Carly.
So, just because I haven't been through this before necessarily, when we think about kind of how to evaluate some, I mean, I know these are examples, but, so for October, let's say, so one of the things that I care a lot about and get feedback about is just kind of the establishing the relationships with the community and that kind of thing. So is it reasonable in October that you might be able to talk about, is there any organized plan of how to do so, or like,
Yeah.
does that make sense that that would be what we should expect
Yeah.
in November?
Normally what you'll get is probably progress on that. Like, for example, Kim and I have been working on taking a look at my calendar and trying to figure out, okay, here's a day that we're gonna block off the morning so I can go help with bus duty at schools, or go into school cafeterias and walk around and visit with staff and visit with students. Or here's an end of a day that maybe we can do bus dismissals. So, doing some of those things. Or I can highlight different events that I've attended or gone to, whether it's a football game or a play or some type of thing that's in those particular areas, or other community things. There's some chamber events and other things that may be taking place. And just share, hey, here's kind of the things that I've been doing, trying to be involved in. And like I shared with you, I think this week, meeting with some of the community representatives and just talking to them about last year and what they're seeing for this year. So reestablishing some of those connections and relationships. So you should be able to get some of those, if that's what you're asking about. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, and I mean, I think I've shared this before, that I think part of it is also us figuring out how to build new paths of connection that maybe haven't
Yep.
been part of that before. So how to connect with different groups in our community. And so that would be something I would hope we would be doing as a board to.
Yep.
So you're talking at both the superintendent and the board
Yes.
level? Yeah, and that, I think that comes into play, particularly with
discuss
the board
ours.
one.
Yeah.
Right.
But, I think with the superintendent as well.
Yeah, and I think, as I think we talked about before, a lot of time this last year was spent more with internal, this office, this department. So some of it, in my opinion, is more outside of these walls of this department and into the schools, into different areas of the district that maybe other staff members that haven't had interaction. Not that I'm going to be able to sit down with somebody for an hour, every day and have a conversation, but maybe spend an hour at that building, walking
Right.
around, engaging, those type of things. So that's probably where a majority of time and energy is going to be spent. Not that the community is not as important, but that's kind of what I heard from conversations that we had in the past, that may be the next level to go to, and then work on the engagement with the outside that you guys are probably going to be working in.
I think about like some of these things that we're talking about are gonna be the same representatives at different, like in a different location. So similar people might go to, have a meeting with you that would be at the chamber event, or that would be at the football game. And so that's where I feel like part of what we have to do is also make sure we're expanding out to reach people that we don't reach at some of
Sure.
those more typically attended events. So it's
Like an example of that would be, we had our Somali group in last year. You probably didn't know that we had our Somali connection group come in, and I met with them, and Lydia, and I think Emily, I think you were there. So, those are the types of things that we try to do. I can't tell you exactly what those groups will be, but we are looking at what those other areas could be as well. So, yeah, I think it's feasible to say you'll get some of that feedback.
Sounds good, thank you.
Do we have any other questions on this format? Is the board okay with this? Look good? Bree?
Yep, good.
Brian?
Yeah, well, here's a question. What happens when you get a 2? What does that mean?
I'm sorry.
What happens when you get a 2? Like, what is that?
I think similar to what I heard even from when the MSBA folks were here with you last time, it probably depends on what you're looking at in that particular area. Is it a short-term goal that's accomplished, or is it a long-term goal? Because you may not every one of these goals may be a 4 every year. It may be, hey, it's gonna take some time for this to happen. And so you have to be able to see where that's particularly at. And then I would say, in my experience, normally what happens in a 2, if it's developing, then the conversation kind of goes to what Carly just asked in regard to, so what is your plan to address this? And it probably becomes more specific. So it's not necessarily, it's kind of like an improvement plan, so to speak, of what is your plan on how do you improve this area if it's not in an area that is above developing. And developing is not necessarily bad. I would say ineffective is bad. Developing may be something happened, and I don't know what it could be, but we all know wrenches can sometimes get thrown. And so that may be, hey, here's what we were able to get done. It's something we need to continue to work on. But if it stays developing 2 years in a row, then I think you got an issue. It's kind of how I view that particular process.
Well, and I would also add that the purpose of the check-in, so by the time we get to the summative, there's no surprises. And so as we're doing the check-ins and any board members have concern, remember the summative isn't 6 or 7, it's a combination of all of us, and it's a board reflection of the superintendent's actions and work. So the check-ins are so that we express our concerns at that time, so they can get addressed along the way. So by the end of the year, hopefully, that's all been taken care of and addressed.
Bree?
So, one question in regards to that. So then, would we do the same type of process that we did for this one? So, you said it's not between the 6 or 7 of us. It's all of us. So do we do this kind of the same thing and then report what we, like,
So
our
it'd be
thought
like-
processes on it?
Right, so it'd be like, I gathered all the responses that we had this year, and it was an informal evaluation, but
Yeah.
then made one summary of what that was, so
Okay.
it's one voice, not
It's not
7.
one summary, it's a discussion
Right.
about what we think should go forward into
Okay.
the review.
Uh-huh.
But what we would do is take these 3 goals,
Mm-hmm.
and we would individually determine where we felt he was at.
Okay, yep.
And then if you felt he was highly effective on something and the majority of the board felt he was developing, we'd have a conversation because there was a gap there.
Got it.
And we would decide as a board where we really thought he fit.
Okay.
And so then the final draft is a agreed to board position on his performance. And then the notes and the comments and the opportunities and action items are things that you maybe wrote a whole bunch of comments, and maybe I just wrote a few, but we don't clump it all together and dump it on him. We decide what is the board action item for going forward.
Gotcha, okay.
Right. Any other questions or comments on that item? Brian?
I think, so the only thing that I see that might be lacking, or just for general awareness, is that, when from my past experience, when you create goals, there's usually a measurable outcome. And so when obviously highly effective, they're ratings that we can check, which is fine.
Right.
But what are the tactical steps or tactical year-end deliverables? Using as an example, if you're in sales, you got to sell $5 million. That is a data metric that you hit that said, hey, I met my objective. And so I appreciate the examples that were listed, but it's also very subjective. My highly effective rating could be vastly different from your developing rating, which is again what Judy shared, where we'd have a dialogue and see where there's a gap. That's just one thing I just want to highlight, that there isn't really a, hey, ta-da, you crossed the finish line, if that makes sense.
It's not a typical corporate
Agreed.
review type of what normal people go through.
It's going to be more of a discussion, I think, as Judy was sharing, than it is going to be how many widgets did you complete and produce, because you're talking about people in a people business. So some of it is going to be a little more subjective, but I think that's why MSBA gave you some of the definitions for those areas, from highly effective to ineffective. I didn't create those. Those came from MSBA. So as we go through those touch points throughout the year, that's probably where that clarification comes through your dialogue and discussion. And if there's a question, we can get a hold of MSBA and say, so here's what he's been doing. Where does this fall within the spectrum of what you think? Because they're a resource for this as well.
So let me just add, we also had that discussion, whoops, sorry, oh. One of the things that we talked about is normally we would have the KPIs and the SMART goals, but because what you're doing here is developing a lot of these processes, we had talked about doing the stoplight, you know, the red,
Right.
yellow, and
Yep.
green, to see where you're at with progress of getting these new processes and things in place. A year from now, it probably will have the KPIs and more of those measurable metrics and stuff. But as you're developing this right now and creating the dashboard and stuff, those are some things that aren't measurable from a numbers perspective, but it's, did he get it accomplished, and are we able to utilize them to meet our needs? So that's how we're probably doing the review the way I understood the first time around.
Correct.
That was my understanding.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so those KPIs and those metrics and SMART goals will be there, but right now it's just getting things in place.
And to me, it depends on what goals you as a board also say you want work on. Because some of them are gonna be more check the box.
Yep.
Some of them are gonna be more, what statistically can you show has happened for that to change? Based off of what was selected, kind of what Judy was saying, some of these are probably more check the box than they are giving you a statistical, hey, I met with, you wanted me to meet with 15 different groups, here's the 15 different groups I met with.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so when the superintendent shared his plan with me as far as like the goals that he had kind of drafted based on board members' feedback that Judy had provided, I tried to align our board goals with that based on our session that we had where we went through some of that. Those were also shared with the board last week. Judy did a wonderful job of making those ideas into actual goal statements to kind of have the three areas that we wanted to focus on. Like I said, ours were kind of made to align with what the superintendent's working on because we're working together in this to try to both move forward. Also aligned to our strategic plan. Judy did a great job of highlighting the superintendent goal for each one that we're working on together. Is there any feedback or questions or comments on our board goals that are just for this year? Keep that in mind. I didn't get any other feedback on it, did you? No, okay. Comments?
Well, I like I like the three. It's simple, it's
Yes.
consistent, so you know, it's information for decision making, which is,
Right.
as a board, that's what we need, so that we've got the appropriate governance in place. You know, the budget, financials, like, I think that's reasonable, and then
Right.
lastly, just continued relationship, so keep it simple.
I wonder if we could, I like when you send out like emails inviting us to various things that we can just say yes to and it puts it in our calendar. Some of, if I'm frankly honest, I wander a lot through this community and nobody knows who I am. And so part of it is like, I shouldn't say nobody, I'm not trying to be dramatic or whatever, but maybe a person here and there. But how do we actually create the visibility that we're wanting to create is, I guess, my question. And so does that mean, you know, sometimes I see city council members wearing a shirt that has a name tag or whatever, or do we travel together, or do we do, I think some of this, how do we be deliberate about it in a way that is effective? How do we know all the things that are going on, that we could kind of try to make sure we're not just going to sporting events, or that we're also attending
Right.
these other theater events, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think at one point, I remember bringing up, do we wear name tags
Yeah.
to some of the events that we're going to? Just so that people know that a school board member is there, because I'm not gonna be the one that jumps up and say, hey,
Well, right.
here I am. Cause I would rather
could be
just
one of
watch
your
and let the
goals,
kids
jump
be
up
there.
and say-
No. The kids can stay on stage, like
I
I'll just
usually wear a disguise.
be here and enjoy the show, but,
But it's not,
Yeah.
if the
So-
goal is really to increase the visibility, then part
So
of it is,
it's kind of twofold. So we're out going to these events in the schools, sometimes for visibility, but also just to see what's going on in the
Sure.
schools for our own learning.
yeah.
But one of the things that I had shared with Kim is if everybody agrees to what these goals are, I think it's important for us then to take one of our upcoming work sessions then and put some intentional action items or goals behind,
Action steps.
action
Yes.
steps behind them as to what we truly want to do to be intentional on that visibility side. Where we want to go as a board, what we do as individual board members to represent the district and to be present. So that's probably the next steps that we need to do now that if everybody's okay with these goals. So give it some thought and let's put some action items behind each of these goals then.
Yeah, that's what because to the point of what Brian's saying earlier, it's
Yeah.
how do we actually judge if
Yep.
we're doing a better job than we were last year
Yep.
or whatever?
Yep, and I think that's important because really the way that we know we're being successful, then again, back to the community surveys, is if people know who we are and they like the decisions that the board's making, we're gonna be reflected being out in the schools and in the community, but also what we do at the table. So I just think we have to now have a follow-up meeting to talk about what those action items are, if everybody agrees to the goals.
In the draft that I had sent to Judy and that we had talked through, I had put in there like just some ideas of what it would look like or what it could look like, based on, our discussions that we've had as a board, the feedback that I received from MSBA. And there were some purposeful things in there that I think we can talk about that can help us like form relationships amongst each other, and just work together as a team better. So, I agree with Judy. I think that would be a good thing to add to a working session, to go through some of the action steps. That if these are the goals we want to focus on, then your homework will be, what does that look like for us?
Yeah, and like one of those action items we already have on the 12th, we have that MSBA
Right.
Phase 3 training we're doing together as a group for leadership development and stuff. So, we already are doing some of that, but now it's really just documenting it of what we really want so that we make sure that we're all committing to doing it. So that we don't have done yet. And I didn't intentionally put in what Kim had sent over, because I think now that these goals are a little bit, be broader and, well, that doesn't make sense, I was gonna say broader and more specific. I guess it doesn't make sense, but maybe more specific to what we wanna do, but broader at the governance level instead of at the administrative level.
Right. Brian?
No, have we moved on to topic B? Are we gonna, is that what?
Oh,
we're
yeah, I'm
talking
sorry,
about now?
yeah.
Do we need to do anything about topic A? Do we need to vote? Do we need to say yes? Do we?
No.
I think everybody agreed,
Everybody.
like I asked.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and then the checkpoint is when, November again? Is that what it is?
We'll send you those specific dates. I want
Yep.
to say it was the first meeting
Okay.
in November and
Got it.
one of the meetings.
Want to have it on the board development session or the work session?
Work session.
Work session.
So the second meeting of the month?
Yep.
Mhm.
For
Okay, so
November,
that would be the
February.
21st
Yeah.
of
And
November
July.
and the 20th of February.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to what you said. I've been here forever, so when I go to places, people know me, but
You're
people.
also principal, so.
Yeah, I was also principal, teacher, yeah. But I would find it hard, and maybe it's just me, if I was new and I wore my badge. Does that?
And I don't mean like parading around Lakeville with my.
Yeah.
I just mean like if we are being intentional about going to certain events, and the goal is, like Judy said, part of it is we wanna see what our kids are doing, we wanna
Mhm.
see
Yeah.
like what do we wanna be able to praise the teachers and all the people in charge.
Or
of
if you're
those things.
specifically invited to like a school event,
Right,
Then
then,
you know who you are.
right, then
Part
you're
of
either
it-
wearing this or you're wearing something that says I'm a school board member, so people know that you're attending.
yeah.
I
Like,
get what you're saying.
I think, it's, if the goal is to, be more aware of what everybody's doing, but also, share to the
Aware that you're
community
doing, too.
that
Yeah.
they know we're there,
Yeah.
that we care, then it does require some of that, because I'm not typically aiming to be identified or whatever, but
Right.
I do think that's important.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm not sure how to do it.
It doesn't have to be a name tag, tag, I feel like even if
Yeah,
it
the
was
name
just like
tag
a
bothers me
Lakeville,
kind
it
of.
doesn't be a name tag, but like, I don't know what kind
A
of.
Lakeville polo.
Yeah, there must
We
be
should have
some,
some boards,
there must be
t-shirts
some
or something.
shirts we
Yeah,
could
we-
get.
it depends, it has to be less than
that are-
$3
I
or
was gonna say
something like that.
cost,
I don't
cost
know.
effective, of course.
I guess I think what also would help is that as you go through this, just the fact that you're having this conversation about, hey, what is our goals? And that people will now hear that you're gonna be taking a look at, intentionally taking a look at events. And you can report some of that back out as part of your board meeting. Hey, I just wanna let you know, as part of our goal, one of the things was, we're gonna try to be more engaged. Here's kind of some things, either Kim can read it or she can have somebody else, hey, here, get a synopsis of, here's some things that we attended. You know, so that people, they may not necessarily know that you're there, but they maybe now will hear that you're there, and maybe they become more intentional in looking, well, is there a board member or a couple of board members at an event? So sometimes it's just the awareness of the fact that you may be trying to do it may be beneficial, because people may not be thinking that you're there or that I'm there. Because I talked to somebody today, they're like, somebody said that they didn't see you at a couple of things. I'm like, well, I talked to you there. And he goes, I know. He goes, I know that you were at these particular events because I saw you and talked to you there. And he goes, but other people don't necessarily know who you are. And I'm like, well, that's because I wear a hat and I do some other things.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
In the past, what we've done is we used to go around the table and at the end of the board meeting, everybody tell what they did for the month or the last 2 weeks. But that got to be competitive between board members. But if Kim, we'll just let you know that the board members attend these areas.
Well, it's another way to utilize our board communication section. I mean, that.
Yeah, that's an idea.
That
Right.
piece is there to do just that. It's to
But
respond.
going around the room was not good because people try to outdo themselves.
Well, that was all
Yeah.
individuals
Yeah.
that were doing that
What about
board.
like, and I know Steph's not here, but like, what about doing something with communications that is shared in the
Or maybe a part of the.
monthly?
I can do that.
Maybe the part of the weekly communications that goes out to,
Well, that's what I mean, like digital.
But that only goes to,
yeah.
oh, you mean like his communications?
No,
It's the
she means
194
the
whatever now.
194 newsletter
Yeah.
that just maybe sends, and she does do that if we're at something where the board is there. She usually takes a picture of board members and that, I mean, it's not all the time, because we don't need to utilize
No.
that
Right.
resource
No.
for all board stuff, but it does, she does do
Yeah,
that.
she took a
when
big
she's
fat
up.
picture of my back of my head last.
Yep,
time.
yep.
Yeah, I remember
Kim
that.
said, you should advertise on the back.
I had to
Yeah.
wear sunglasses. I was-
Put the logo of the district on the back of your head.
And that may have taken you off, sorry, I didn't mean to take you off, but to me, that may be part of the conversation that you have at your next
Yep.
thing, is be
Yeah.
thinking
Yep.
about how do we purposefully do some of these things, and then how do we communicate those aspects of it, so, I was just throwing that out there, I
Yep.
wasn't trying to
Good.
sidetrack you, sorry.
You didn't sidetrack.
Just don't criticize us when we go along.
We're doing all right, look
All right.
at the clock.
So, does everyone agree with these goals? Is there anything we're missing? Like, do these goals meet the needs that were brought for all board members?
Do you wanna just read them so that,
Sure.
just the highlighted ones, so that people who are listening?
Yep, so board goal number 1 is to increase board member public engagement throughout our school community to foster a stronger sense of connection and involvement among our district stakeholders. Board goal number 2, enhance the Board of Education leadership to cultivate a more dynamic and skilled team to better support our systems to meet the needs of our district and the needs of our students. Board goal number 3, strengthen operational oversight to ensure efficient and effective management of resources and process, leading to improved district performance and cost effectiveness. Oh, she did a great job of wording
I
I
like
did like the way
goals.
those big
Nice,
words all
nice.
roll together.
You did a good job, Judy.
That's the fourth time. That's
I
enough.
seriously, I just
That's
gave her
enough.
like
That's the
one word
fourth time you
things.
said that today.
One word things, and she
Her
comes
head
back
is
with
gonna
this
be
beautiful
this big.
statement. I'm like, thank you. That's it.
Can you tell I do this for a living?
She didn't put enough lawyer lingo in it for you or something?
It's really good.
No, I'm just,
It's really nice. Yep, everybody agree?
I like them.
All right. So then our last item on our agenda is meeting norms. This was a topic that came up during our MSBA training where we talked about making our meetings more effective, how we communicate with one another, and how we communicate during regular board sessions as well. So one of the ideas that MSBA brought was having meeting norms. Superintendent Van Zyl said maybe that's something we could put on the top of every agenda to remind us of like, these are our points and these are the things that we want to hold and adhere to. So I kind of came up with a draft of 6. And we can, work through this and see how you guys want to do it. But my first was be prepared, be present, adhere to confidentiality, respect dialogue, no surprises at the table, and one board, one voice. Those were the ones that, like the ideas that I thought of, they can be worded a little bit better, but just like today when we had stuff that was sent to us beforehand, I expected that all of you had read that and were prepared. That's something the board has asked the administration to give us information in advance. So if they're taking the time to do that, then I respect that we are going to do that as well. Being present in the meeting means that we're open to everything that's going on around us, we're paying attention, we're not having side conversations, we're present and in the meeting. As far as the confidentiality piece, obviously there are parts of our job and role as board members where there's some confidentiality with that I would expect board members to adhere to. Maybe we could take that one off because people already know that, I don't know. As far as respectful dialogue.
Can I just make a comment about that one?
Sure.
I think the confidentiality one needs to come off because this is meeting norms for public meetings.
Right.
So I think that may be a meeting norm if we have like a closed session or something, but in
Right.
general, for
Okay,
our
yeah.
public meetings, I'm not sure that.
Like I said, it's one of those
Yeah,
things that
no,
it's there,
it-
but we probably already know about it.
It's important when, for the closed sessions, but when we're talking about.
Right.
It seems kind of,
Yep, not needed,
yeah,
get it,
or not appropriate for a public meeting.
right. For respectful dialogue, I was thinking, making sure that, we're not interrupting one another, that we're waiting for acknowledgement from the chair when we're having a regular meeting so that everybody gets a turn to talk. That we're not calling out personal individuals, but we're talking about the topics. So I'm not saying, Terry, I really don't like that you don't say that, I'm talking about the topic, right? Which I know we already know, but anyway.
I can still make fun of Terry though, right?
You can.
Okay.
You can. No surprises at the table. I don't mean that we shouldn't have discussion at the table, it's just that if there's something that you want in board communications, or if there's something you want to remove from the agenda, just letting us know in advance so that we can prepare for that. Because sometimes I forget to ask for that, so that's kind of my own thing too. And one board, one voice, I mean, even if we're voting 4-3, when we walk away from the table, we all agree that was the way that the majority of the board voted, and so that we're one voice on that. Anyway, so I guess we're down to 5. Does anybody else have anything to say about that, or
Go back to number 1.
be prepared,
Yeah, number 2.
be present?
Yeah, when I heard that, I said, be at the meetings. That's the way I interpreted it. Can we word that a little differently?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, I was thinking of it in a mindful way. That's like my
Be
psychology.
engaged.
Be engaged,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah,
I think be engaged.
Okay.
How about be
So, you know, our-
respectfully engaged?
I have respectful
Okay,
dialogue
all right.
on it.
Yeah, well, and I think that's separate, that's separate to call out and stuff, because, our advisory councils all have meeting norms, and there's
Right.
no reason why we shouldn't have them,
Right.
so.
Right, and just know that, like, as chair, like, and I'm running the meetings or, trying to facilitate that, if there's something that's going on, like, maybe Dave's half an hour late, he comes in, he wants to do something, I'll be like, hey, you gotta be prepared for your meeting, follow up with me in advance, or after the meeting, and we can do that, just to make things run more
I mean,
smoothly.
if you come late, don't
Yeah.
backtrack and make
Yes.
everybody repeat
Yeah.
themselves, because you're
Yeah.
now here.
Yeah, like,
Yes.
be prepared, right?
Yeah.
So then I'll follow up with you later, you can follow up with me later, and I'll go over what you missed type thing, so,
Yeah, be engaged, that's good.
yeah.
So, be prepared,
Be
be
engaged.
engaged, respectful dialogue. What else did you say?
No surprises at the table,
Yep,
one board, one voice.
yep.
Yep.
That good? Okay, I'll write them down and I'll send them out in an email, and you can think about it for a while, because I'm
Anything
Processor.
At the top of our agenda since from then on?
all agendas, yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask
Go ahead, Carl. You go.
I was gonna say, I think these are good meeting norms. I think the respectful dialogue is the one we've had a problem with
strength across time since I've been on this board, and how are we gonna kind of hold each other accountable? Is that your responsibility, or do we hold each other accountable, or what is the process for
I
that?
think during the meeting,
No, go for it.
I was gonna say during the meeting, it's your responsibility.
During a regular meeting, it should be the chair that does that, but during like a working session, I think we can all hold each other to that standard. Because I'm not going to call someone out and say, whoever, you shouldn't have called Terry out individually, we need to talk about this topic. I'm going to say, remember that our meeting norms are we're going to have a respectful dialogue around topics. That's it,
So
right?
that's
And we should all know what that means.
So that's for any board member.
Yep.
to-
Yeah.
But I think it's also important that, there is gonna be disagreement at the table.
Right.
And, you can have, constructive conflict
Right.
decision or discussion.
Yep.
But at some point, it may, you and I maybe just need to talk one offline, that there's something I'm doing that you wanna address with me. We should be able to address things with each other. But if we also have continual, accountability issues with a board member, it is up to the chair to have a discussion saying, you continually step over the line with this meeting norm. And as a board chair, you do have the responsibility to have that one-off conversation if the one-on-one isn't happening.
Right, right. The whole point, is, yeah, we're going to have disagreements, but, we want to preserve the diverse perspectives that we bring to the table and respect those, because that's just going to make things better. All these different perspectives help us plan around making things better for our students and our staff, so, anyway.
Two things that I would just
Yep.
add, is that if you put it at the top of your sheet, normally what I recommend is you read those at the start of each one of your meetings. Probably
Yep.
what you should be doing is just say, hey, remember our meeting norms are one,
Yep.
this, two, this, three. And then to the other point, not that I think Kim would get out of line, but if for some reason she is, then it falls to your vice.
Oh, yeah, I'll
your
take
vice
care
chair
of it.
to probably have that conversation with your chairperson, so. Because we've all seen that, you get some people that are leading the meeting and they dominate the meeting, and so there's gotta be that other person that holds that check and balance.
That's
I'm
why I
not
sit
saying that for
next to
Kim,
her,
but, just out of fairness to everybody, it applies to everybody in that process. There's somebody that holds that check and balance in how those norms are done.
Right, right. And I also need to get better at making sure that I'm checking in with people. If you haven't commented on something, I'm trying to be more mindful about that, which is why I said something to you tonight, Bree and Brian, just to make sure that we're all putting our voice in here, because your voice is important. You were elected by the people, and everybody wants to hear from all of us. So I hope this helps us, come together as a team and hold to that. Go for it.
Again, this is just my take, you take it from there. Your chair has some responsibility, but I also think it's also fair expectation, and I don't know if you need to make it a meeting norm or not, she shouldn't have to pull that out of you, because that's kind of an unfair pressure to put on her. You may literally not have anything to say, but if she calls on you, it may be awkward. You may not have anything that you want to say, but I think you have to be part of that engaged component is I think where that also ties into. That the engagement is that you're gonna actively be involved in the conversation. If you have something to say, you don't leave the table and then call her up and say, hey, this is what I want you to do differently. That's, I don't think, not that I need to defend Kim, but having worked with chairpersons before, I've had people that have done that, and it's a very hard position for them to be in. So I think that's part of maybe when you have your dialogue about engagement, is that your engagement is not only listening and being involved, but actively speaking what your thoughts or your things are without her having to, we're all adults, we should be able to do that
Right.
without her having to pull it out of you. But she'll be mindful if it, like she just said, she seems to try to be, if there's an issue, she may ask, but I think that may be a little bit unfair to put. And if you don't agree with me, say, Doug, you're wrong, but I've
No.
experienced that before, and I think that is, in my opinion, right or wrong, you say, hey, Doug, you're off base, that's not where it, and I'll be quiet, and Kim can handle it that way, but I also need to try to defend her a little bit in that
I
process.
agree with that, Doug, because we have to make sure that the discussions and decisions and agreements that happen at the table, when we leave, we have to know that that's where we're at. And it can't change between now and the next meeting because dialogue's outside of the boardroom. So I think it's really important that if you have something to say, you say it at the table, because once the decision is made, we have to respect that decision of the board and not alter it from there. So unless we come back in another public meeting and have that discussion. So we have to make sure that the voices are heard at the table.
Right.
I think too, though, if one board member kind of dominates the conversation,
Right.
that prevents the other board members from saying things, so the chair has to kind of.
Right, and technically, if we're following Robert's rules, and I know a lot of us are new members and we're still learning that, no one should speak twice until everyone's had a chance to speak once. I know that's hard sometimes when you have a question and then follow-up questions, and I try to honor that, because then I get it, I lose my train of thought too, so. And I think a lot of this also will just evolve as we become more comfortable with each other. I'm kind of a shyer person, so I need time to sink in and feel comfortable with people too, so. Yeah, so like I said, if there's something that I need to point out, like, you know, if Brian has another question, and I say, hey, on a second, because I want to get Bree, because she hasn't had a chance, I think we're all adult enough to understand that, you know, write it down real quick so you don't forget, but I'm trying, you know, we'll try to stick to Robert's rules with that too, so that doesn't happen.
I do think part of the kind of communication we've had about making sure we get materials more in advance
Right.
is probably helpful for facilitating that, because then
Yep.
people have more time to review.
Right, right. Yeah. All right, so I will send these out over email too, just so you have another chance to look at it, process it, think about it. Make sure maybe you have some more eloquent wording than me. Totally fine with that. Just let me know. Other than that, we've completed everything on our agenda. Like I said, we were going to have a second part of our meeting, which will be like a staff development. We have some training that we're going to go through as a board. That's going to start at 7, so we'll adjourn until 7 o'clock, which in case we will come back as a meeting where the board will go through training. So at this time, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.